Well, this is awkward. I am making a second video on this because I quickly realized that the original video I made wasn't very good. Um, and I wanted to make something a little bit better. I wanted to do a double take on this one. So, this is a video on the current situation of devsisters, the financial situation of devsisters that's been a little bit of a talk of the town lately. Some YouTubers have made videos on this, but I haven't seen anyone actually delve very deep into this. Or at least I don't think I have, because without due honesty, I do not really like watching cookie run content on YouTube, but that's a topic for another day. So, full disclaimer, we don't have any real confirmation for anything that I'm about to say. Both things that seemingly have been announced in news websites and things that I will say my own personal opinion on the matter. So, do not take this as gospel. Do not assume that I am telling the complete, total truth and spread this like it is the truth. Come to your own conclusions. I just want this video to be like a little bit more context on what is going on. So, dev sisters, please, if you see this video, please don't kill me. Okay, I do not want any trouble. Okay, okay. So, let me introduce myself first. Hello, my name is Juan Botam. You can also just call me Botam. And my credentials for this is that I have been a Cookie Run fan since April 2018. So, it's been a little while at this point, at least compared to other people in the fandom. So I think I have a little bit of the agency to talk about this. Um, and that's what I'm gonna do. So, for context, let's start off with context. About 3 or 4 days ago, at the time of writing, which is 14th of May 2026, a website called news.net, which is a Korean news website, posted a news article talking about how some devsisters employees, including the CEO, have been working without pay. Why is that? Because supposedly, according to the article, Oven Smash is underperforming. And by the way, sorry if you hear my cat in the background. Okay? Ignore her. So some salaries are being cut by 50%, some are retiring voluntarily, and apparently devsisters stocks are going down because of Oven Smash's supposed failure in the eyes of devsisters. Um, so that's not very good. And there are some claims, mostly on Twitter. devsisters is also mostly operating on a loss. There is a supposed screenshot of a summary of performance, according to the automatic translation, of devsisters' first quarter revenue of 2026. The revenue total is about 60 billion won, and their operating loss is 17 billion won, and their net loss is 15 billion won, which I believe will total around 30 to 32 billion won loss, somewhere around that. I think that's somewhere around the the total loss. And I should point out that I haven't really found any like evidence of this summary of performance revenue thing for Dep Sisters. I don't know where it must come from. So it could be a total lie. Take that with a grain of salt, but it might be real. Um, and how did we get here? Uh, well, according to the news article, first of all, Oven Smash isn't doing very well. It's underperforming from what devsisters wanted. I imagine there's not many people playing, or at least there's not enough people playing as much as devsisters wanted. But I also believe that this goes a little bit deeper than just Oven Smash underperforming. I don't think the downfall that devsisters is having this year is only because of Oven Smash, because I believe if it were just Oven Smash, it would be a lot more manageable for devsisters, and I will get back to that. So, there's a lot of people worried that devsisters will go under, and I want to address some misinformation that I've seen going around. So, first of all, I've seen claims that devsisters has lost about $15 billion. That's not true. Devsisters has lost, it's been a net loss of 15 billion won. And 15 billion won is around $10 million. So devsisters is not losing billions of dollars, they're losing billions of won. There's a very clear difference. Um, And something else that I want to talk about is the talk of bankruptcy that's going on in the fandom. So, is devsis going to go bankrupt? We don't know. If they do, it's not gonna happen anytime soon. It could happen. I'm not saying it couldn't, but I think it's very incorrect to say that devsisters will definitely go bankrupt. I think that's a lot of fear mongering from the fandom, especially the younger um, users of the fandom. They think that bankruptcy is like the complete and total end of a company, and that's not true. Um, there's many types of bankruptcy. It's why it's called chapters. There's different chapters of bankruptcy, and not all of them mean that a company is going to cease to exist. Bankruptcy can mean reorganization for the company. It can mean liquidation. It can mean, you know, reorganization, these kinds of things. And sometimes bankruptcy can mean the death of a company. So if devsisters does go bankrupt, it doesn't automatically mean that the company will cease to exist. It just means that they're admitting that there's something wrong and they have to fix it. And they're going bankrupt because bankruptcy offers some protection for the company, like an attempt to recuperate their losses. And a lot of people seem to think that devsisters going bankrupt will mean the definitive end of Cookie Run. Um, that's not necessarily true. It can mean that, but it doesn't have to mean that. Bankruptcy can give a company the chance to sell their stuff, to sell their stocks, to sell their assets, and that can include, I believe, anyway, that could include their IPs. So devsisters could totally like try selling Cookie Run as an IP to another company in like a desperate attempt to keep themselves afloat. So devsisters going under this hypothetical situation with devsisters definitely dies does not necessarily mean that Cookie Run will die. But if it does, and I have to say this now because I know a lot of people are worrying about this, if Cookie Run does stop being an active franchise because devsisters died, this does not mean the death of Cookie Run as a whole, because you can still make fan content, and I think this is very important to point out, even if it's like ultimately pretty meaningless and stupid, because there's a lot of people out there who are like freaking out because they're like, oh my god, if Cookie Run ceases to exist, what are we gonna do with our AUs, our OCs, our fan content, our fanfics? You can still make Cookie Run fan content even if the franchise itself stops receiving content. There's nothing stopping you there, okay? I just feel like that's important to point out because there's a lot of people like freaking out over Cookie Run dying. And it's not the end, okay? devsisters going under, Cookie Run stopping being an active franchise does not mean that you can no longer make content for it. It's not like there's something in the law that says if a franchise stops being active, you are going to go to jail if you make fanfic. That's not. I'm pretty sure that's not real. I don't think I've ever seen that. And you guys can like stop freaking out about that, okay? And something else that I want to point out, and I will go into detail a little bit longer, a little bit later, is that there are a lot of people who are trying to blame Dev Sisters' current struggles um, with Shadow Milk's continued inclusion in Kingdom. And I have to point out before I continue that I fucking hate Shadow Milk Cookie. He is my least favorite character in the entire franchise, one of my least favorite characters in anything that I've ever liked, any franchise that I've ever liked. I hate him, and I hate his inclusion in the story. I hate how he still gets content while the other beasts suffer for it. So this isn't me being like a salty Shadow Milk fan trying very desperately to protect his their fictional favorite character. That's not what I'm doing. But it is very incorrect to assume that it is only Shadow Milk Cookie or only Kingdom's recent updates that have resulted in the Scissors struggles. Because, yes, there have been lower. There have been some less than happy opinions on the recent Kingdom updates starting this year. There's been poor performance, there's been a lot more outcry and outrage from the fandom. And I do think that the current direction that Kingdom is taking does not really help Dev Sisters. However, I don't think it is entirely the reason. Because if Kingdom were the sole reason that Dev Sisters is struggling, it would still be extremely bad. Don't get me wrong. It would still suck for Dev Sisters if it turned out that Kingdom was the whole reason they're going under. But it is not unmanageable. They can still manage. The problem actually goes deeper than just Kingdom, and I do believe that as much as Kingdom is a reason for Dev's poor performance, I think Kingdom is also a result of Dev's poor performance. It's like a loop. Kingdom gets worse, Dev Sisters gets worse, and as a result, Kingdom gets worse, and Dev Sisters gets worse, and it keeps going. So I don't think that Kingdom is entirely the reason why Dev Sisters is in the pit that they are right now. And I also think that Dev Sisters being in the pit that they are right now is the reason why Kingdom is seemingly worsening. And I'll get to that in a bit. Sorry, I gotta hydrate. And this is where I will start being a little bit more opinionated because I want to give my point of view on why I think Dev Sisters is struggling and Cookie Run as a whole is struggling. As someone who's been in the fandom for nearly a decade at this point, let's just say. So, the number one reason why I think that Cookie Run is struggling the way that it does, the reason why Dev Sisters is kind of fucking up as much as they are, is because they are putting out too many live service games at once. And they don't seem to realize that live service games are not as easy as they think they are. First of all, game servers cost a lot. I think people underestimate how much game servers cost, because it's it costs a lot to host a server that's always online, that has thousands, if not millions of people, and we know there's millions of people because Kingdom has like 10 million registered users. It costs a lot, and it's going to put a lot of strain on not only the physical hardware that's used to host these servers, but also the pockets of the people that are hosting these servers. Which is like, for example, certain MMORPGs like Final Fantasy XIV or World of Warcraft require you to start paying a monthly fee after a certain point for you to keep playing, because that monthly fee, um it goes into server costs most of all. It does also go into developing the game itself, but it also goes primarily into server costs. Um, and I think devsisters seems to assume that just because something is free, it's going to attract a lot of people. But microtransactions in live service free to play games are not as easy as they look. Because there's a pretty prevalent problem in a lot of fandoms that the biggest money makers, for like a live service game are the whales. That's not actually true. What is the most money making demographic in a live service game is is the people that will just like buy a buy a few crystals here and there, or buy a package that levels up their favorite cookie. It's the little purchases that somebody makes because they don't think that it's going to affect them very much, regardless of how much it actually affects them. The whales, they are going to keep going because they want to think that, because they have this sunk cost fallacy feeling, right? Because they've already spent so much money that they just gotta keep going. Um, But when you're a regular player and you're very unhappy with how the game is going, like for example, Kingdom's current struggles with being a good game, let's just put it very nicely like that. Someone's going to look at that and sorry, hold up. Okay, sorry. Someone's going to look at that and they will think, I don't think I want to support this company if they're going to just give me bad updates. And that's how we get lower revenue, because the people that will give you the most money, they're unhappy with your game and they don't feel the need to keep spending their money. Because why will they spend their $10 on a package for a game that's underperforming if they could use that money for another game that's actually doing well and giving them what they want? So that's one of the things, right? Dev Sisters, they seem to think that people will just spend their money like crazy, and that's not really what's happening. And so, the server costs, they are not met. Um, and Dev Sisters has 7 active games right now because we have Cookie Run Oven Break, Cookie Run Kingdom, Cookie Run Tower of Adventures, Cookie Run Witch's Castle, Cookie Run for Cacao, and Cookie Run India, and Cookie Run Oven Smash. I almost forgot about Oven Smash. How funny. Um, and that's a lot of games. That's a lot of like service games. And yeah, I know, Witch's Castle, it can be played offline. But even if we take Witch's Castle out of the equation, that's still 6 live service games with a bunch of server costs that are not being met. And Dev Sisters doesn't seem to realize that. Um, Sorry, where was I again? All right. There's a lot of games. There's a lot of server costs, and Dev Sisters, they're not really delivering good enough experience for people to feel the need to either spend money or even play the game. Um, and let's take Oven Smash for example, because it's the newest game and it's the one that's being used as an example in the news article that announced Devsister's current financial struggle. Um, First of all, and has been a problem since I was new to the fandom. Devsisters is really, 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 really bad at advertising their games. For example, um, Kingdom, their flagship title, their most popular title. It got announced in 2018, and then we didn't get any sort of news until 2020, to the point that we all felt that the game was going to get cancelled because, like, that's 2 years without any news. And the reason we didn't get any news is because the game was going through development hell and it got reworked from the ground up like a few times, like at least twice, I think. And then when it did start get getting advertised to us, it was like less than a year until its release. I think it was like 6 months until release or something like that. So that was very little time for us to get like acclimated to the fact that Kingdom was going to be a game that was going to exist in a few months. And while I'm on the topic of Kingdom, it is a pretty big player on why devsisters is um, doing so bad, but not for the reason you think, because it's not actually like completely like the underperforming updates that they've been releasing recently. It's actually been a problem since Kingdom released, because it might seem crazy to a lot of newer players, but Kingdom's success was not exactly planned or necessarily deserved, because the reason why Kingdom got so popular, first of all, it released in 2021, when we were still, when most of the world was still on lockdown from the pandemic, so people didn't really have much to do at that time. Let's just say, um, putting it very mildly, okay. Um, so it did release. It did release kind of on the perfect storm, but I don't think Dev Sisters really intended for that. But what really got it super popular was the Genshin first anniversary fiasco, where people were like super angry with Genshin because it gave them bad rewards or whatever. I don't care. So a it was very much a success story that was completely accidental. Um, because a lot of Kingdom fans were like, "Ha, you guys are having it so bad, but we're having it so good here over on Kingdom." And Genshin players were like, "Oh my god, their game looks so much better. I'm gonna go there." So it wasn't exactly intentional. It was just a case of fate that Kingdom did so well, like it did. And I think Dev Sisters doesn't seem to really realize that, because they've been searching for that high ever since then, and they haven't found it because Dev Sisters sucks at advertising. They only advertise their games to their fans and not any new potential players, people who aren't already in the fandom, people who don't really know much about Cookie Run. Um, and they barely even advertise it to their own fans, you know? Um, and because they only really try to advertise to their own fans and how little they actually advertise to their own fans, most people aren't exactly interested in the genres that Cookie Run has been dabbling in lately, like Witch's Castle. I don't think most people really care about the gameplay of Witch's Castle. I think most people are only there about the story because it's a it's a Candy Crush clone. Most people who are into Candy Crush are like grandmas or mothers, you know? And it's not really like gotcha people who want to get a new Blorble every other month. Um, so, I don't really know what Dev Sisters is trying to achieve with that, but, it's a lot of factors. Dev Sisters is bad at advertising. They're not very good at, like, um, making games that would actually interest their player base. And when they do have a game that's different from the rest, they are bad at advertising it to their actual consumer base and not just the Cookie Run fan base. And I actually think that Death Sisters only making cookie run content like 99% of the time, while seemingly ignoring like original IPs kind of worsens their current struggles with money. But then again, Brick City got updates for like 6 months and then stopped and it died. So, you know, I guess Devster is just cursed. But then when Dev Sisters does try to advertise to other consumer bases, you know, I it just doesn't end very well. And I think Oven Smash, part of the reason anyway, Oven Smash did so badly is because they made a MOBA. And the problem with MOBAs is that it's a heavily monopolized genre. My credentials is that I am League of Legends player and I have played Dota 2 and Mobile Legends in the past, so I know a little bit about MOBAs. And MOBA is a very different genre to get into, to get new games into. Because on the PC market, League of Legends and Dota 2 dominate, okay? There is Might, sure, Battle Right still technically exists, but these games really struggle to do anything compared to League of Legends and Dota 2. And on the mobile market, there's Mobile Legends, there's Honor of Kings. Um, you know, that part of the genre is also heavily monopolized. So, unfortunately, I hate to say it, I don't think Oven Smash had any chance. Um, and I remember hearing someone say something very interesting, and that Dev Sisters tried to advertise to Brawl Stars players, but the problem is that if a Brawl Star player is already playing Brawl Stars, why would they move over to Cookie Run? They've already got one game. Why would they move to another? It's the same reason why League of Legends players usually don't move over to Dota 2, and Dota 2 players usually don't move over to League of Legends, unless they're like actually quitting their game. Because why would you play more than one game when you could just play the one that you already know and you already like? When you don't know if the other game is good or worthwhile or has any interesting characters, you know? So basically, I think Dev Sisters, as funny as this is going to sound, and it is going to sound very funny, I think the problem is that Dev Sisters is kind of like gambling on their games. They're gambling a lot on their game releases. They're hoping that they're gonna have the next kingdom, and it just doesn't happen. You know, because they don't give people time to prepare for the new games. They don't make games in genres that most Kikuren fans would find interesting. They're bad at advertising games to the the consumer base that they should advertise to, and when they do it in a way that's not really helping their case, especially in a fucking MOBA. Um, and I don't know how they can really improve the situation with Open Smash. To be honest, a lot of people have said that like, oh, they should add a story mode to the game. I don't really think that's gonna help. Because the appeal of MOBAs has never really been story mode. There's rarely even a story mode. League of Legends doesn't have a story mode. I'm pretty sure Dota 2 doesn't have a story mode unless they added it in the years that I haven't played. Mobile Legends, I'm also pretty sure doesn't have a story mode. The appeal of a MOBA is the gameplay. And if devsisters does add a story mode, there's not really any guarantee that it would work because let's say that you are interested in Oven Smash's characters, but you don't really care about the gameplay. If devsisters does add a story mode, what's really stopping you from not actually playing the game for the story mode and just waiting for someone to upload it to YouTube? You know? Someone else could do the job for you and you wouldn't have to waste your time playing the game. So I think that's also a gamble that Dev Sisters should probably not partake in. First of all, because the MOBA community does not want a story mode, they want a game that's fun to play. And a story mode cannot save bad gameplay for the MOBA community. League of Legends does have a story lore focused community, but it's usually extremely separate from the MOBA community. And even then, people who are in the lore community, they like the lore outside of the game. They don't play the game for the lore, they play the game for the game. So I don't really think that story mode could save Oven Smash, but that's my opinion, you know? If somebody else who's also a MOBA fan could, like, I don't know, give their perspective into this, it would be nice. But that's my take as somebody who has been playing League of Legends for longer than I have been playing Cookie Run. Um, and now I want to get into something. Can the fandom do something to help? No, we can't. Because, let's be real, most people in the fandom are like 15, 14-year-olds. I don't know what exactly a 15, 14-year-old could do to help a company that's like in the fucking pit. Like, yeah, giving your suggestions on how to improve Kingdom, that could probably help improve Kingdom, but it's not really going to get devsisters out of the money pit that they've put themselves on. It's really up to devsisters themselves to kind of save themselves from the disaster, or another company to like come along and, I don't know, be an angel investor or something. Um, and I know that people who are trying to like save devsisters in quotation marks. Imagine I'm doing quotation marks with my hands right now. Um, they're doing what they can because they don't want to see the company that makes their favorite game die. And I get that, and I'm not trying to invalidate that feeling. But there isn't much that the fandom itself can do unless you spend your money. And let me just say this before like any 13, 14-year-old gets the wrong idea. Don't spend your money. Or if you have like a gambling addiction or you're bad at managing your money and you're an adult. I don't know. I don't care. Don't spend your money trying to save Dev Sisters. That's your money, and you should not use it to try to save a fucking company. You should use it for your own means, okay? Dev Sisters should try to get out of this money pit by themselves. It's not your duty to try to save a company that you don't know. Um, please? I don't know how to continue. Just please? Like, yeah, share videos and comment your suggestions on how to like improve the game or whatever. But the only way to really affect any of this is money, because that's what Dev Sisters needs. And you should not waste your money on something like this. Realistically, you shouldn't spend your money on video game virtual stuff in a video game anyway. But especially not in a situation like this. Okay. Um, But what do I think that Dev Sisters should do to improve? That's a complicated question because I. It's difficult. It's gonna take some sacrifices. And I can't say for sure that what I think could save Dev Sisters is definitely going to save Dev Sisters. I could be sending them even more to the pit. So I don't want to really say anything concrete because I don't want to be I don't know, I don't want to be responsible for the death of a company, okay? Um, but personally, I think the problem is that devsisters has too many games that are active, that are not making profits. I think devsisters should maybe sacrifice some of their games, like EOS, some games like Oven Smash or whatever, because it's safer than like keeping these games active with very little payoff. Well, um, you know, their money keeps getting sucked dry because their games aren't making any money, but they require money to keep operating. So that's what I think devsisters could do. Oven Smash could probably be sacrificed. Maybe Tower of Adventures, maybe Witch's Castle, I don't know, but I can't really give any concrete answer on what Dev Sisters should do, and I can't give any concrete answer what's gonna happen to Dev Sisters because it's a very recent development, and I can't predict the future. And I will say, I don't want Dev Sisters to go under, if only because I don't want the employees of the company to suffer. Because if Dev Sisters goes under, that's a bunch of people who are gonna lose their fucking jobs. And let's be very clear here, the video game, um, the video game industry right now is not in a very good spot. It's very difficult for people to get jobs. It's very difficult for people to not get fired. A bunch of video game companies are laying off their employees en masse it's because they don't want to lose money. And I don't want that to happen to Dev Sisters, you know. Um, but yeah, it's complicated. I don't know if there's much people can do besides just wait and like I don't know, hope for the best. I guess. Um, but yeah, to reiterate, don't take everything with a grain of salt. We don't have any proper confirmation that any of this is true. We don't have any proper confirmation, or at least I don't have any proper confirmation that the first quarter revenue report for devsisters is true. Devsisters is not going to go under, definitely. We don't know if devsisters will go bankrupt. It could happen, but this is not a promise, and maybe people should stop acting like it is. Um, and it is certainly not the fault of Shadow Milk Cookie that Dev Sisters is is struggling right now. It's a lot more complicated than it seems. You know? And that's kind of the reason why I made this video. I wanted to like clear some things up. I wanted to give my perspective of someone who's been around for a little while. Um, I think the best thing that we can all do is just wait and see. Because I don't think Devil Sisters is going to be very open about this. I think they'd rather like try to solve it quietly. And I think that's fair. I think that's completely fair for a company to do, you know. So maybe let's just not try to like doom post and spread misinformation about this whole situation because it's a fandom full of kids and a lot of kids who are very anxious about this. Um, so let's try to be civil about this situation. Okay, that's what I really wanted to do. I just wanted people to like maybe chill. It's not the end until Dev Sister says it's the end. I think that's what you should take away from this video most of all. But Dev Sisters definitely kind of got themselves into this situation, I'm not gonna lie.